Today we are going to discuss the topic diabetes and oral hypoglycemic agents. Myself, Dr. Dipti Bandhavne, working as Professor of Department of Pharmacology at Progressive Education Society's Modern College of Pharmacy, Nigdi, Pune. In this topic, we are going to see what is diabetes mellitus, what are its different types, what is the etiology and pathogenesis involved in diabetes mellitus, and oral hypoglycemic agents used to treat diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus is a metabolic disorder characterized by elevated blood glucose level, what we call it as hyperglycemia. This hyperglycemia is mainly because of lack of insulin in circulating blood. Either the insulin is absent or the insulin is less in amount. Or in certain cases, it may happen that insulin is there in the blood circulation, but that insulin is not able to act on the target tissues for glucose utilization by those tissues. Besides hyperglycemia, the other characteristics of diabetes mellitus include glycosuria, hyperlipidemia, negative nitrogen balance, and in some cases, ketonemia. Diabetes mellitus leads to disturbance of carbohydrate, protein, and fat metabolism. Treatment of diabetes mellitus is necessary as prolonged rise in blood glucose level leads to conditions called as complications of diabetes mellitus that include diabetic nephropathy, diabetic retinopathy, diabetic cardiomyopathy. Before discussing types and pathogenesis of diabetes mellitus, it is necessary to know how the blood glucose level in normal person is maintained. So mainly the organ which is responsible for maintenance of blood glucose level is pancreas. Basically pancreas has two functions, exocrine function and endocrine function. So exocrine part is mainly related to digestive function. Endocrine part is related to maintenance of blood glucose. It is taking place by two hormones secreted by endocrine part of pancreas. The two hormones are insulin and glucagon. Insulin is secreted by pancreatic beta cells, whereas glucagon is secreted by pancreatic alpha cells. Now, insulin causes decrease in blood glucose level, whereas glucagon causes increase in blood glucose level. So, it should be noted that secretion of insulin and glucagon takes place only when blood glucose level changes than that of the normal level. Another important aspect of blood glucose maintenance is glycogen. Whenever the circulating blood glucose level is in excess, that glucose is stored in certain tissues like liver and skeletal muscle in the form of glycogen. Now, how the secretion of insulin and glucagon is stimulated, that we will see. As shown here in the diagram, how the blood glucose level is maintained with the help of insulin and glucagon. We can see here, whenever the blood glucose level is high, that is the upper part. Now the blood glucose becomes high after meal. So after meal, what happens? Blood glucose level high. So beta cells of pancreas are stimulated for secretion of insulin. Whenever insulin is there, it acts on insulin receptors and then causes the target tissues to take up the glucose and store it in the form of glycogen. In this manner, excess blood glucose level is reduced. Once the blood glucose level is reduced, stimulus for secretion of insulin has been declined. On the contrary, when the blood glucose level is low, now in which situation it will be low? In the situation like starvation or fasting. So whenever the blood glucose level is low, alpha cells of pancreas are stimulated and they release glucagon into the blood. Glucagon act on the liver and it causes breakdown of glycogen to glucose. That glucose is released into the blood circulation. So blood glucose level, which was earlier normal, below than the normal level, now goes up and it becomes normal. Once the blood glucose level becomes normal, the stimulus for secretion of glucagon will be declined. In this manner, in normal person, the blood glucose level is maintained. Since topic of our discussion is diabetes, we are concerned with high blood glucose level. So whenever the blood glucose level goes high, how insulin acts to reduce that blood glucose level to the normal. Here we can see insulin makes glucose to be transported into cells for energy for the body. Basically, glucose is the preferred fuel of the body cells and the only fuel that brain can use. Insulin also converts glucose to glycogen to be stored in muscles and liver. It facilitates conversion of excess glucose to fat, and it prevents the breakdown of body protein for energy. The process what we call it as gluconeogenesis. Diabetes mellitus is mainly categorized into type 1 and type 2 depending on presence or absence of insulin in the blood circulation. First, type 1 diabetes mellitus, also called as insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, because patient will not survive if insulin is not given exogenously. This is because these patients have extensive damage of pancreatic beta cells. So pancreatic beta cells are not capable of secretion of insulin. Since insulin is absent, exogenous insulin is needed for regulation of blood glucose. In type 2, it is also called as non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. This is because patient can survive even though insulin is not given or administered to the patient. So here the reason for rise in blood glucose is insulin is there in the blood circulation, still cells of the body cannot utilize the glucose because of presence of additional factor as shown here. That factor is called insulin resistance. Type 1 diabetes mellitus, it usually occur under 30 years of age and therefore it is also called as juvenile onset diabetes mellitus. It is an autoimmune disorder having sudden onset of severe symptoms. There is rapid weight loss, total lack of insulin in the body. It is characterized by production of ketone bodies and it is associated with genetic predisposition. Type 2 diabetes mellitus usually occurs above the age of 40 years, although recently the age of diagnosis is getting younger. The onset is gradual with mild symptoms. Majority of the times, the normal amount of insulin is secreted, but it is unable to work properly due to factor insulin resistance. And type 2 diabetes after prolonged period leads to complications. Now another type of diabetes mellitus that is called as the temporary, you can consider, that is called gestational diabetes, that is diabetes diagnosed during pregnancy. In majority of the cases the diabetes vanish after birth of a child. However, nowadays the trend is seen that whatever is the diabetes diagnosed during pregnancy, that may lead or that may continue afterwards and leads to type 2 diabetes mellitus for mother. Now, it requires insulin injections during pregnancy for treatment. The etiology behind type 1 diabetes mellitus is most of the cases it is idiopathic, that is not exactly clear. It is mainly because of autoimmune destruction of pancreatic beta cells and therefore insulin is necessary. Type 2 on the other hand is called as the lifestyle disorder because it is mainly, although genetic factors are involved, but mainly it is related to lifestyle of a person that leads to insulin resistance. So that includes current sedentary lifestyle, diet that includes highly processed sugary food, lack of exercise and excess body weight. Gestational diabetes is associated with insulin resistance and adiposity present. Now, how the progression of type 2 diabetes mellitus takes place, that is shown here. Initially, the person have normal level of insulin, but physical factors or environmental factors like weight gain and physical inactivity causes central obesity. Because of this central obesity, although insulin is there in the circulation, that insulin cannot reach to the insulin receptors present on the target tissues, particularly skeletal muscles. Now what happens because of this? Because of this, there is continuous signaling to the pancreatic beta cells for secretion of insulin. Since body is always in the need of glucose, At actual, the glucose is high in blood, but since it cannot reaches to the tissues, continuous signaling is there and therefore there is progressive loss of pancreatic beta cells. For certain period, the beta cells will try to cope up with this. After a particular time, the beta cells will damage and there will be dysregulation of blood glucose, what we call it as a diabetes mellitus, and there will be persistent high blood glucose level which needs treatment or management. So the main factor involved in etiopathogenesis of type 2 diabetes mellitus is insulin resistance. What is insulin resistance? It is a condition in which body produces insulin, but that insulin is not used properly. How? Insulin needs to be bound to insulin receptors present on target tissues. Once insulin binds to the insulin receptors, it is responsible to reduce the blood glucose level by increasing the entry of glucose from blood to the tissues. But in case of insulin resistance, insulin cannot bind to the insulin receptors and therefore, although insulin is present in the blood circulation, it will not be helpful to reduce the blood glucose level. Now, how to manage type 2 diabetes mellitus? As discussed earlier, it is a lifestyle disorder. So, chances are there that if the symptoms are mild and if the blood glucose level is not high, in that case, it can be managed without inclusion of any drug therapy, only by modifying diet and exercise. So, proper diet, that means fatty food should be less, carbohydrates should be less, rich in protein, along with proper exercise. Exercise increases the utilization of glucose without involvement of insulin in skeletal muscle. Now with this, if blood glucose level is still there high, then go for oral hypoglycemic agents. The different oral hypoglycemic agents are there. We are going to see in detail the classification. Amongst all, either of the drug has to be used depending on the symptoms shown by the patient. If blood glucose is still high after using oral hypoglycemic, then the oral hypoglycemics have to be combined. Either of the drugs have to be combined. And finally, if it is not controlled, then the last option remained is oral hypoglycemic agents along with insulin injections for the management of type 2 diabetes. So here the targets of different oral hypoglycemic drugs are shown. You can see liver and skeletal muscle, they are the targets for biguanides and thiazolidinediones. Pancreas is the site of action of sulfonylureas, meglitinides and insulin, and gastrointestinal region is the area of action for alpha glucosidase inhibitors. Here is the classification of various oral hypoglycemic agents. These agents, it should be noted that they are used for only type 2 diabetes mellitus, because as we earlier discussed, type 1 diabetes mellitus strictly needs insulin. So here three categories they are categorized. First is drugs which are targeting insulin secretion. So these drugs are stimulating the insulin secretion through whatever pancreatic beta cells are functioning. That includes sulfonylureas and meglitinides. Another class is the drugs which are targeting insulin resistance. So that include biguanides and thiazolidinediones. And one more class is there, that is targeting glucose absorption from intestine, that includes alpha glucosidase inhibitors. Now the diagram here shows the sites particularly for oral hypoglycemic drugs. So the sites includes liver and skeletal muscle, where metformin and thiazolidinediones act. Metformin comes under biguanides. Pancreas is the site of action for sulfonylureas and meglitinides, whereas carbohydrate digestive enzymes in the digestive tract is the site of action for alpha glucosidase inhibitors. The drug is acarbose. One by one, we will see all the classes of oral hypoglycemic agents. First class is sulfonylureas. It is classified into subclasses, that is first generation and second generation. First generation sulfonylureas include tolbutamide and chlorpropamide. Second generation include glibenclamide, glipizide and glimepiride. How these drugs help to reduce the blood glucose level? These drugs act on so-called sulfonylurea receptors present on pancreatic beta cell membrane. By binding to sulfonylurea receptors, they cause depolarization and reduces conductance of ATP-sensitive potassium channels. This further increases influx of calcium, causing degranulation. Degranulation results in increase in rate of insulin secretion. These drugs mainly have effect on second phase of insulin secretion rather than first phase. So it becomes necessary that some part of means some of the functioning pancreatic beta cells should be present so that these drugs can act on those cells and they can stimulate those cells to produce the insulin. So obviously functioning pancreas is not present in type 1 diabetes, so these drugs are not useful in type 1 diabetes. They are only reserved for type 2 diabetes mellitus. All sulfonylureas are well absorbed orally. They are 90% bound to plasma proteins, characterized by low volume of distribution. Some agents are metabolized, while others are mainly excreted unchanged in urine. Therefore, these compounds should be used carefully in patients with liver or kidney dysfunction. Major adverse effect of this class is hypoglycemia, that is more common in elderly patients. Also, it is observed in patients of liver and kidney disease. It is treated by giving glucose. The glucose may be given for few days so that it may not recur again. Non-specific side effects include nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, and weight gain. Hypersensitivity reactions include rashes, photosensitivity, and purpura. Beta cell exhaustion because of continuous stimulation of beta cells for brisk release of insulin may be one of the adverse effects of sulfonylureas. Sulfonylureas have the tendency to exhibit number of drug interactions with lot of drugs, so it has to be prescribed carefully. The drug interactions can be categorized as drugs that enhance or potentiate its action and thereby may precipitate hypoglycemia, or drugs that decrease its action and may reduce the antidiabetic effect of the drug. So first category, that drugs that are enhancing its action, in that drugs like phenylbutazone, sulfenpyrazone, these drugs causes displacement of sulfonylureas from plasma protein binding site. Therefore, blood level of these sulfonylureas increase, leading to toxicity. Certain drugs like cimetidine, sulfonamide, warfarin, they inhibit its metabolism or excretion and thereby increases the toxicity. Drugs that decrease the action of sulfonylureas, that include drugs like phenobarbital or phenytoin. They act by inducing metabolism and reducing the blood levels of these drugs. Drugs like corticosteroids or thiazides, they have opposite action as that of the sulfonylureas and therefore they reduce the antidiabetic effect of sulfonylureas. Biguanides. This class of oral hypoglycemic drugs include fenformin and metformin. However, fenformin is not used clinically because of its toxic effect of lactic acidosis. Metformin is the only compound available used clinically. Now this metformin, it do not have any effect on secretion of insulin, rather it acts or it increases sensitivity of insulin receptors for insulin. So whatever insulin is circulating in the blood circulation, that insulin acts more effectively on the target tissues like skeletal muscle and liver. So metformin increases peripheral uptake of glucose into cells, and this is mainly by enhancement of GLUT1 transport from intracellular site to plasma membrane. They increases insulin mediated glucose disposal in muscle and fat and also suppresses hepatic gluconeogenesis and hepatic glucose output. Thus, they differ from sulfonylureas that they do not stimulate pancreatic beta cells, They do not produce hypoglycemia in non-diabetic subjects. That can be the advantageous thing as compared to sulfonylureas, and they do not produce weight gain. So they are useful in obese patients. Biguanides include two compounds, fenformin and metformin. However, fenformin, because of its characteristic toxic effect of lactic acidosis, not useful clinically. So only compound which is used in clinical practice is metformin. Metformin acts basically not by increasing the level of insulin in the blood circulation, but whatever insulin is there, it increases the effect of that insulin by making available. Adverse effects of biguanides include lactic acidosis. However, as earlier discussed, fenformin is responsible for producing lactic acidosis and it is no more used clinically. Metformin does not show lactic acidosis as it is poorly concentrated in hepatic cells. However, alcohol ingestion can precipitate severe lactic acidosis. High doses of metformin can produce vitamin B12 deficiency due to impaired vitamin B12 absorption. It also shows gastrointestinal disturbances indicating nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Severe dehydration can be seen. Metformin is contraindicated in renal impairment, liver impairment, and in patients of heart failure. Class meglitinides include repaglinide and nateglinide. These are recently developed quick and short-acting insulin releasers. These drugs act in the manner similar to that of sulfonylureas. They bind to sulfonylurea receptor as well as other distinct receptors, causes closure of ATP-dependent potassium channels, thereby producing depolarization and insulin release. They induces rapid onset of insulin release, but the insulin release is short-lasting one. Therefore, it is administered before each major meal to control postprandial hyperglycemia. If the meal is missed, the drug should not be administered. Similar to sulfonylureas, these drugs require some functioning pancreatic beta cells, so they are only effective in type 2 diabetes mellitus and cannot be used in type 1. Adverse effects include weight gain, mild headache, dyspepsia. These drugs are contraindicated in diabetic ketoacidosis, pregnancy, and severe hepatic impairment. Class thiazolidinediones include rosiglitazone and pioglitazone. These are the novel class of oral antidiabetic drugs that are selective agonists for nuclear peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma, which enhances transcription of several insulin responsive genes. These drugs inhibit insulin resistance by stimulating GLUT4 expression and translocation. Because of this, there is improved entry of glucose into muscle and fat. Also, there is suppression of hepatic gluconeogenesis. Mainly, fatty tissue is the major site of action of these drugs. They improve the insulin resistance in fatty tissues. Besides reducing blood glucose level, these drugs reduces glycosylated hemoglobin without affecting circulating insulin. Side effects include weight gain, GI disturbances, edema, headache, dizziness. Sometimes non-response cases are seen. These drugs are contraindicated in pregnancy, liver impairment, and in patients of heart failure. Acarbose is the example of alpha-glucosidase inhibitors. Alpha-glucosidase is the enzyme required for the digestion of carbohydrates in the brush border of small intestinal mucosa. Acarbose is a complex oligosaccharide which reversibly inhibits the enzyme alpha-glucosidase. Therefore, it slows down and decreases digestion and absorption of polysaccharides and sucrose. Postprandial hyperglycemia is mainly reduced without increasing insulin levels. It do not show hypoglycemic effect, that can be the advantageous thing, and it is taken with or just prior to meal. Adverse effects of acarbose is mainly because of fermentation of unabsorbed carbohydrate, and that include GI disturbances, like flatulence, diarrhea, abdominal distension, and pain. It is contraindicated in pregnancy, liver and renal impairment. Also, should not be used in inflammatory bowel disease and intestinal obstruction. So, when to go for use of oral hypoglycemics? The oral hypoglycemics are indicated only in type 2 diabetes when not controlled by diet and exercise. In type 2 diabetes mellitus also, certain criteria are given for use of oral hypoglycemics. The criteria are shown over here. The patient's age should be above 40 years at the time of onset of disease. Obesity, if the patient is obese, then oral hypoglycemics can be given. Fasting blood glucose level of the patient should be less than 200 mg per deciliter and insulin requirement should be less than 40 units per day. The patient should not have any history of ketoacidosis or any other complication at the time of diagnosis. In today's session, we have seen what do you mean by diabetes mellitus, what are its two types, what is etiopathogenesis behind diabetes mellitus, and then in detail oral hypoglycemic agents used for treatment of type 2 diabetes mellitus. Thank you.